If you take any large traditional capitalist firm, you'd find that around 85% of their revenues was returned to the workers and the managers and the top managers in the form of salaries and wages. In the case of Meta, 1%. So I insist, folks, capitalism is kaput. This is something far, far worse.
In de wereld stroomt geld rijkelijk, maar tussen arbeid en kapitaal groeit een steeds grotere kloof. Op de dag van de arbeid in Griekenland wordt dat van de daken geschreeuwd. Yanis Varoufakis, ooit de minst brave financiële minister van het Europese schoolklasje, verklaart in zijn laatste boek dat het kapitalisme dood is en al lang en breed vervangen door iets nieuws.
You said capitalism died and that we now live in technofeodalism. Why do you use a medieval term to describe a very modern society?
My term technofeudalism does not refer to something that happened before capitalism. It refers to what happened after capitalism. But the second part of the word, after techno, the reference to feudalism, I think is very important. Because we need to understand that if you look at the so-called Magnificent Seven, the 7 largest companies in the New York Stock Exchange, the ones that are really driving American capital as we speak. You know which ones they are. They are Google, they are Meta, Amazon, Nvidia, and so on. Their amazing returns, revenues, net revenues, they're not profits. Every time you buy something of Amazon, it has not been produced by Amazon. What Amazon has produced using a new form of capital, which are called cloud capital, which is the algorithms, the interfaces, Alexa, this whole networked machinery, it has created something like a fiefdom in which you, me, as consumers, buyers, or sellers, manufacturers, we congregate there, we exchange with one another, but we do not communicate with one another. We are only matched, brought together, a bit like a dating app, by the algorithm created by the cloud capital of Jeff Bezos. And Jeff Bezos doesn't care what you buy or what I sell, as long as he collects 30, 35, 40% of the price. That's a rent. Now, what is the nearest economic unit or concept to Amazon? It is not a capitalist enterprise, because take the Ford Motor Company under Henry Ford. It was also a very large company. It belonged to a megalomaniac, a very poor excuse for human nature. Henry Ford, he was a misogynist, he was a quasi-fascist. You know, like the cloud tech lords of today.
Profits rose, car prices dropped. The demand for Model Ts rose as the workers themselves began to buy them.
The fundamental difference was that what Ford wanted you to do was to buy the product that was coming out of his machinery, out of his production line. He had a monopolistic enterprise, oligopolistic enterprise, making one thing, and he wanted you to buy it, the Model T, the car. Amazon doesn't care what you buy, doesn't make what you buy. The nearest you can come to that as an economic mechanism is the fiefdom from the medieval age. Of course, there is a fundamental difference. The fiefdom was based on land, on actual soil. If you were a member of the aristocracy, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and ownership of land. And then anyone who worked on that land gave you a cut, 60% of the produce, 50% of the produce.
Varoufakis wordt vaker een anarcho-syndicalist genoemd, zoals de landpachters in een iconische sketch van Monty Python. Door het technofeodalisme van Varoufakis is die iconische sketch weer relevanter dan ooit.
Who is your lord?
We don't have a lord.
What? I told you, we're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. I order you to be quiet.
Order? Who does he think he is?
I'm your king.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
You don't vote for kings.
Amazon can only be conceptualized properly as a fiefdom, but it's not made of land, of soil. It's made of capital. So that is why I'm saying that technofeudalism is not a stage that is behind capitalism, is a stage after capitalism. It is based on capital, but it is based on a very specific form of capital, which, rather than being a produced means of production, like the machinery building Model Ts for Henry Ford, it is a produced means of behavioral modification, which is a unique, in the history of humanity, machine.
Dus de technofeodalisten bouwen niet langer machines die producten maken, maar machines die ons gedrag sturen?
Cloud capital has two characteristics. The first one is that it comprises machines that are connected with one another, not in the cloud. That's the metaphor. The second characteristic, which is, I think, the most crucial one, which of course would not be relevant if it wasn't for network machines, the second characteristic is that it doesn't produce anything except the power of its owners to put us in a pen into a digital fiefdom and make us do things with one another, trade, write one another, swear at one another if you're on X, former Twitter, in a manner that allows them a capacity to extract value from the rest of society and from us.
Εργατική πρωτομαγιά σήμερα. Εργατική πρωτομαγιά σήμερα. Βρισκόμαστε στο τέλος μιας 20ετίας, ενός σκληρότατου, βάναυσου, ταξικού πολέμου εναντίον της εργατικής τάξης στην Ελλάδα. Οι εργαζόμενοι πρέπει να πάρουν, να αγκαλιάσουν τα πρωτοβάθμια όργανά τους. Καλή πρωτομαγιά. Είχα και λογοκρισία. Δεν τον έχω μάθει έτσι.
The only power humans have against tyranny, against organized stupidity and superstition, is understanding, comprehension, understanding the laws that govern our life. And now we have something which is based on capital, a new form of mutated capital, which I call cloud capital, and that has given rise to a new system, a system which is qualitatively different from capitalism. It's a form of capitalism, but it's best described as technofeodalism. At least that's my story, but this is not for demonstrations. This is for a conversation like the one we're having.
Volgens Varoufakis is de echte tegenstander niet meer het vrije marktkapitalisme, want dat is niet meer aan zet. We leven al in een postkapitalistisch systeem.
Amazon.com. It looks very much like a market. You go in there are millions of sellers, there are billions of buyers. Okay, there are all these commodities, services, everything. You can buy all sorts of things in Amazon.com. Does it make it a market? It doesn't. And I'll tell you why. You and I could walk down that alley at a farmer's market and look at the different wares, the different fruit, and say, oh, I don't like that, no. I don't like the face of this guy, or I don't like the look of these tomatoes, right? And the beauty of the farmer's markets is this degree of freedom that you have, which is provided to you by the fact that there is no central authority. Nobody tells you, this is the tomato for you. Take it or leave it. Now, if you and I had our laptops here, you type electric bicycles on your iPad, I type electric bicycles. You'll get 5 different recommendations to me. The algorithm decides which bicycles you will see and which bicycles I will see. Because the algorithm knows you. You have trained the algorithm, the cloud capital of Bezos. You've trained it to train you, to train it, to train you, to train it, to train you, to help it know you so well that it matches you with sellers on the basis of a mathematical statistical model that maximizes the likelihood function that Bezos would extract the greatest rent from the person who will sell you that bicycle. Now, I cannot talk to you unless we happen to be in the same room. I cannot talk to bicycle producers. I am totally in the hands of the algorithm. This is a dictatorial, top-down marketplace which doesn't function like a market. The way that Amazon.com works, and like all cloud thieves work, would be the wet dream of the economic planners of the Soviet Union.
But as a consumer, most of the people would say, what's wrong in getting the bicycles I like?
This is the power of Amazon. The power of cloud capital is that individual consumers have no reason to resist them. I buy from Amazon. So I concur with the spirit of your question, because as a consumer, it's ever so easy and relatively cheap and quick and efficient. But as a citizen, I realize that this is the beginning of the end of what we understand as civilization.
Get this box out of here! Whoa, I feel like this is going so fast. Oh my God, ooh, for a small bite, Jesus.
Take the effect of this technofeodalism on our macroeconomy. You know, you buy this, or you make this, and it costs you €1, and you sell it for €2 because you've blended within it labor, materials, the logo, the design, and you have added value to it, and you retain the difference. No, Amazon, which makes gigantic quantities of money, and which is driving to a very large extent what you might consider modern capitalism, is collecting rents. This is money that disappears from the circular flow of income. When Bezos takes billions out, you know, last year Amazon had 55 billion revenues in Europe and paid exactly zero tax, zero. And that money never comes back to the European economy. So aggregate demand collapses by 30–40%. And that means, even if you are never buying anything from Amazon, even if you are one of those Luddites, neo-Luddites who say, I don't want a phone, I'll have an old Nokia phone without a connection to the internet, right? You are still not free of the effects of technofeudalism because the whole economy's aggregate demand comes down, then the European Central Bank has to print more money in order to stabilize it. That creates inflation, that creates losses in the purchasing power of the poorer people. We have a majestic concentration of power in very, very few hands, much fewer, far fewer than we had under standard classical capitalism. But it's not only that. It's not only that our ruling class is no longer the 1%, not even the 0.1%, but it's the 0.0001%. Not only that, but you have the other mind-boggling, mind-numbing statistic or number. If you take any large traditional capitalist firm, you'll find that whether it's ASML or General Motors, once upon a time, you'd find that around 85% of their revenues was returned to the workers and the managers and the top managers in the form of salaries and wages. About 85%, more or less the same. Huh? In the case of Meta, 1%. 1% of the revenues goes to workers in the form of wages and salaries. So not only do you have the concentration of ownership in the hands of the 0.001%, but what goes to the rest, who are not owners, is a tiny percentage of the revenues. The rest is wasted. The rest simply bids up asset prices, yachts and works of art and Bitcoin and all that, right? And doesn't come back into the circular flow of income. So essentially, the social fabric suffers even more. So you have macroeconomic crises that are getting worse. You have the diminution of good quality jobs. You have the conversion, therefore, of people in Holland, in France, in Italy, in Greece. They go from being proletarians to being precariat. They have, gig jobs like in Deliveroo or Uber and so on. It means precarity taking over our society that leads to discontent, that fuels fascism. And therefore, we have a civilizational threat as a result of the fact that it's so easy to buy from Amazon. So that's why you should worry, even though it's very tempting to carry on buying from Amazon.
Whoa, I feel like this is going so fast. Oh my God, ooh, for a small bite, Jesus.
We need to rethink, as left-wingers, as liberals, we need to rethink our strategy. We are losing our capacity to communicate without being mediated by the algorithms that will always poison public debate. The greatest threat to democracy is not so much some tin pot dictator that will ride into town on a tank. It is cloud capital. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't use it. We should use it. The left knows this very well because we were always using printing presses belonging to capitalists in order to propagate a critique of capitalism. But if we simply go along with whatever the algorithms are demanding of us without organizing collectively, democratically, then we will always lose to cloud capital. Personally, I think that artificial intelligence is magnificent. You know, the fact that there exists, as we speak now, there are AI programs that are designing antibiotics that can save people from various bacteria that would have killed them otherwise. That is a remarkable achievement of the human spirit, and we should celebrate it. I'm not against the machinery. We have to use the tools and the weapons of the enemy in order to give humanity a chance. If you think about it, the Luddites, who were very misrepresented by historians, who were involved in the same thing. They were not destroying the machines because they were against the machines. This is a great misrepresentation of what the Luddites did. They were destroying the machines as a form of protest for the fact that their lives were being destroyed. They had no problem with the machines. They had a problem with the owners of the machines that were using the machines to effectively deny them a way of existing. I want to give you one simple example, an abstract example, all right? Now, take a company that has 100 workers. It could be a media company, it could be a company making bicycles or some material good, doesn't matter. Right? And let's say that an AI-driven robot has been discovered, has been invented, that can do the same job with only 50 workers. Okay? Now, why not use it? Well, if it is a company owned by some offshore registered fund, they will immediately take this Android and fire half of the workers. And those workers will have to drive Deliveroo cars or motorcycles, you know, and their lives diminishes. Now, imagine an alternative scenario. Imagine that that company belongs to those 100 workers. And they bring in the Android, and they need to work half of the time. So they spend half of the time looking after the elderly, you know, writing poetry, looking after their kids. Now that is a good use of the machinery. So we need to use the machinery in order to go against the social relations between human beings that force us to use the machinery in a way which is anti-humanist.
So your solution would be that we keep the cloud capital, but we change it, the ownership of it.
That's why I'm a socialist and why that hasn't changed. Cloud capital doesn't change that. The democratic socialist idea of common ownership, one share, one worker, one vote, to put it this way, remains more pertinent today. And if anything, cloud capital has made it more pertinent because now there can be no social democracy in the old traditional way of maintaining capitalism and simply having a government that redistributes incomes. That's gone, finished. Cloud capital has ensured that this can no longer be the case. So we need to socialize all forms of capital, in particular cloud capital.